The rain drummed against the hospital windows as Grace Martinez finished her 12-hour shift in the pediatric ward, her scrubs wrinkled and her feet aching from another long day of caring for sick children. She was gathering her things from her locker when her phone buzzed with a frantic text from her best friend Jessica. "Grace! Emergency! Food poisoning from lunch. Can't make my blind date tonight. Please go in my place. He's already at Romano's and I can't reach him. I'll owe you forever." Grace stared at the message, exhaustion weighing down her shoulders like a lead blanket. The last thing she wanted was to spend her evening making awkward conversation with a stranger, especially when she could barely afford the gas to get home, let alone dinner at Romano's, one of the city's most expensive restaurants. But Jessica had been there for her through nursing school, through her mother's cancer treatments, through every financial crisis and emotional breakdown of the past 3 years. Grace couldn't let her friend down now, even if it meant using the emergency $20 bill hidden in her wallet. An hour later, Grace stood outside Romano's in her only nice dress, a simple black number she'd bought at a thrift store 2 years ago for her nursing school graduation. She'd done her best with makeup to hide the circles under her eyes and twisted her long brown hair into what she hoped looked like an elegant bun rather than a tired nurse's attempt at sophistication. The maitre d' looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain before leading her to a corner table, where a man sat alone, checking his phone with the particular restlessness of someone who'd been waiting longer than expected. Grace's first impression was that Jessica's friend had excellent taste in men. He was probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His navy suit was clearly expensive, but he wore it with the casual comfort of someone who dressed well every day, not someone trying to impress. He looked up as she approached, and Grace saw surprise flicker across his features. Not disappointment. Exactly, but confusion. "I'm sorry," Grace said, extending her hand nervously. "You're expecting Jessica, aren't you?" "I'm Grace, her friend. Jessica got food poisoning and asked me to come explain in person rather than leave you waiting alone." The man stood, accepting her handshake with a warm smile that transformed his entire face. "I'm Michael. Michael Reed. And while I'm sorry Jessica is sick, I have to say I'm not disappointed by the substitution." Grace felt heat creep up her neck. "That's very kind, but I should probably just go. I know you two were set up specifically, and I don't want to intrude on—" "Please," Michael said, pulling out her chair. "Stay for dinner, unless you have somewhere else to be. I've been looking forward to adult conversation all week, and honestly, you'd be doing me a favor." Something in his voice, a note of genuine loneliness that matched her own, made Grace hesitate. "I should warn you, I just got off a 12-hour shift at the hospital. I'm probably not the best company right now." "You're a nurse?" Michael's interest seemed to sharpen. "What kind?" "Pediatric oncology," Grace said, settling into her chair despite her better judgment. "I work with kids who have cancer." Michael was quiet for a moment, studying her with new attention. "That must be incredibly difficult." "It is," Grace said simply. "But it's also the most important work I've ever done. These kids, they're so brave, so full of hope even when they're facing impossible odds. They teach me something new every day about what really matters." The waiter appeared, and Grace's stomach clenched as she glanced at the menu prices. Even the appetizers cost more than she usually spent on groceries for a week. "Just water for me, please," she said quietly. Michael frowned. "You must be hungry after such a long shift. Please, let me buy you dinner. It's the least I can do after you came out in the rain to explain about Jessica." Grace wanted to refuse. Her pride had been ground down by years of financial struggle, but it hadn't disappeared entirely. However, the gentle way Michael made the offer without pity or condescension made it feel less like charity and more like simple kindness. "That's very generous," she said. "Thank you." Over dinner, a perfectly prepared salmon that probably cost more than Grace's monthly phone bill, she found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. Michael was easy to talk to, asking thoughtful questions about her work and sharing stories that made her laugh despite her exhaustion. "What do you do?" Grace asked as they shared a dessert that arrived looking more like art than food. Michael hesitated for a moment. I'm in business. Import-export mostly. It's not nearly as interesting as what you do. Do you like it? Another pause. It pays well, and it gives me flexibility to spend time with my daughter. That's what matters most. You have a daughter? Grace's face lit up. How old? 8. Her name is Emma. Michael's expression softened completely. She's everything to me. Her mom died when Emma was 3, and it's been just the two of us ever since. Grace felt her heart clench with sympathy. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you. It was the hardest thing I've ever been through. But Emma, she's this incredible little person who finds joy in everything. She's taught me more about resilience than any business school ever could. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing naturally from Emma's love of painting to Grace's work with families facing pediatric cancer, from Michael's struggles with single parenthood to Grace's dreams of maybe someday having children of her own. When the check came, Grace excused herself to the restroom, partly from necessity but mostly to give Michael privacy to pay what she was sure was an astronomical bill. When she returned, he was standing with their coats. "Let me drive you home," he said. "It's still raining." Grace almost refused. She'd taken the bus as usual and didn't want to explain her lack of a car, but something about the evening, about Michael's easy kindness and genuine interest in her life, made her accept. His car was a revelation, not flashy but clearly expensive, with leather seats that felt like clouds after her usual cramped bus rides. As he navigated through the city streets, Grace found herself studying his profile, wondering about this man who spoke so lovingly about his daughter and listened so intently when she talked about her young patients. "Turn left here," she said. As they approached her neighborhood, suddenly self-conscious about the modest apartment complex where she lived, Michael pulled up outside her building without comment, though Grace noticed his eyes take in the area, not wealthy but clean and safe, the kind of neighborhood where working people lived paycheck to paycheck with dignity. "Grace," he said as she reached for the door handle. "I know this wasn't exactly planned, but I had a wonderful time tonight. Would you like to have dinner again? Maybe this weekend?" Grace turned to face him, seeing something in his expression that made her heart skip. "I'd like that," she said softly. "But maybe somewhere less expensive? I'm not really a Romano's kind of person." Michael smiled. "I know a great little Italian place that makes the best pizza in the city. Very casual, very reasonable. Emma loves it." "Emma? I'd like you to meet her if you're comfortable with that. She's been asking when I'm going to bring home a friend, and I think she'd really like you." Grace felt something warm and unexpected bloom in her chest. "I'd love to meet her." 3 days later, Grace found herself sitting in a cheerful little restaurant with checkered tablecloths and mismatched chairs, watching Michael try to help his daughter blow the perfect bubble with her gum while they waited for their pizza to arrive. Emma Reed was a miniature version of her father, with the same dark hair and intelligent eyes, but she had a spirit that was entirely her own. She'd shaken Grace's hand solemnly when they met, then immediately launched into a detailed explanation of the painting she was working on at school. "Daddy says you help sick kids feel better," Emma said, regarding Grace with 8-year-old directness. "That's really important work." "It is," Grace agreed. "Sometimes the best medicine is just having someone who cares about you. Like how Daddy takes care of me when I'm sick? Exactly like that." Emma nodded approvingly, then returned to her art project, a detailed drawing on her placemat that appeared to involve unicorns, rainbows, and what might have been a rocket ship. Watching Michael interact with his daughter, Grace felt something shift inside her heart. This wasn't the casual dating she'd attempted occasionally over the years, always hampered by her work schedule and financial constraints. This felt like something deeper, more real, a glimpse of the kind of life she'd dreamed about, but never quite believed was possible for someone like her. Over the following weeks, Grace found herself drawn into their world in ways that surprised her. Michael would pick her up after her shifts, bringing Emma along for impromptu dinners or trips to the park. Emma seemed to accept Grace's presence, with the easy adaptability of childhood, asking her opinion on homework assignments and insisting that Grace sit next to her during their weekly movie nights. It was during one of these movie nights, 3 weeks after their first meeting, that Grace began to understand there was more to Michael's story than he'd initially shared. Emma had fallen asleep during the second half of the movie, curled up between them on the couch in Michael's living room. Grace had been so focused on the child that she hadn't really examined her surroundings until now, but as she looked around, she began to notice details that didn't quite fit with his description of himself as being in import-export. The penthouse apartment was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The art on the walls looked original and expensive, and the casual way Emma talked about her private school and weekend horseback riding lessons suggested a level of wealth that went far beyond comfortable. "Michael," Grace said softly, not wanting to wake Emma, "what exactly do you import and export?" Michael was quiet for a long moment, his hand unconsciously stroking his daughter's hair. "Companies, mostly," he said finally. "I'm sorry. I buy companies that are struggling, restructure them, and either sell them or integrate them into larger operations. I should have been more honest from the beginning, but..." He looked at her with something that might have been vulnerability. "Do you know what it's like to never be sure if people like you for yourself or for what you can provide?" Grace thought about her years of nursing school, working 2 jobs and still barely making rent. She thought about choosing between groceries and textbooks, about the careful calculations that governed every purchase, every decision. "No," she said quietly. "I don't know what that's like, but I do know what it's like to worry that people will judge you for what you can't provide." Michael turned to face her more fully. "Grace, I need you to know that I never intended to mislead you. That first night, when you said you were just a nurse who couldn't afford Romanos, and I could see you adding up menu prices in your head, it was the first time in years that someone was completely honest with me about who they were and what they needed." "So you lied about who you were?" "I simplified," Michael said carefully, "because I wanted you to know me as just Michael, just Emma's dad. Not as Michael Reed, who owns half the commercial real estate downtown and shows up on Forbes lists." Grace absorbed this information, understanding dawning slowly. "You're not just comfortable. You're actually wealthy." "Very wealthy," Michael admitted, "and very lonely until I met you." Grace looked down at Emma, still sleeping peacefully between them, and felt the weight of this revelation settling over her like a heavy blanket. "I don't know how to be in this world," she said finally. "I don't know how to date someone who probably spends more on wine in a month than I make in salary." "Then don't," Michael said simply. "Don't date someone wealthy. Just date me, the man who burns pancakes on Saturday mornings and reads bedtime, stories with different voices for every character, and falls asleep during movies because he's been up since 5 a.m., worrying about quarterly reports." Grace was quiet for a long time, watching Emma's peaceful face and thinking about the past 3 weeks. Michael had never made her feel inadequate or out of place. He'd never suggested she should change or be different than she was. He'd simply invited her into his and Emma's life with a warmth that felt like coming home. "The night we met," she said finally, "you said you'd been looking forward to adult conversation all week." "I had been. Being a single parent can be isolating, especially when you're trying to protect your child from the complications of your professional life." "And now?" Michael reached over Emma to take Grace's hand. "Now I look forward to coming home because I know you might be here. Emma asks about you every morning at breakfast. You've become part of our routine, part of our life, and I don't want that to change." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. "Michael, I work in pediatric oncology. I'll never make the kind of money that fits into your world. I take the bus to work because I can't afford a car payment. I buy my clothes at thrift stores, and my biggest luxury is the coffee I get from the vending machine at the hospital." "And you save lives," Michael said quietly. "You hold the hands of children who are fighting for their lives, and you give hope to families in their darkest moments." "You think money impresses me more than that?" Emma stirred between them, mumbling something about unicorns before settling back into sleep. She needs stability, Grace whispered. She needs to know that the people in her life aren't going to disappear. Then don't disappear, Michael said. Grace, I'm not asking you to change your life or your work. I'm asking you to share it with us. Let me take care of the practical things, the car, the apartment, whatever makes your life easier so you can focus on what you do best. I can't let you can let me love you, Michael interrupted gently. You can let me support your work, your dreams, your independence. You can let Emma have the mother figure she's been asking for without knowing she was asking. You can let yourself be happy. Grace looked around the penthouse again, but this time she saw different details. Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator, children's books scattered on expensive furniture, a father's love evident in every corner of their shared space. What if I can't fit? She asked, voicing her deepest fear. Michael shifted carefully, moving closer without disturbing Emma. Grace, you already fit. You've been fitting for weeks. Emma lights up when she sees you. I find myself making excuses to drive by the hospital just hoping to catch a glimpse of you leaving work. You haven't been trying to fit into our life. You've been making it better just by being yourself. 3 months later, Grace stood in the same pediatric ward where she'd worked for years. But everything was different. She still wore scrubs and spent her days caring for sick children, but now she came home to a family that loved her. Michael had indeed taken care of the practical things. The reliable car that got her safely to work. The larger apartment they'd moved to together so Emma could have her own art studio. The security of knowing that her mother's medical bills were no longer a constant source of stress. But more importantly, Grace had discovered that love wasn't about fitting into someone else's world. It was about creating a new world together. Michael had learned to appreciate the simple pleasure of pizza dinners and movie nights. Emma had gained not just a stepmother, but a champion who understood that the most important things in life couldn't be bought. And Grace had learned that sometimes the best things in life really do happen when you least expect them, when you're tired and unprepared, when you're just trying to help a friend, when you think you're too different from someone to ever make it work. Standing in her hospital break room, reading a text from Emma about her latest art project and another from Michael asking what she wanted for dinner, Grace smiled. She'd gone on a blind date as a substitute, never imagining she'd find not just love, but home. Sometimes, she thought, the most beautiful surprises come disguised as ordinary favors for friends, and sometimes the person who never lets you go again is exactly the person you never saw coming.